Greetings, everyone. Today we're going to answer the question, can you liberate Orange Star with a clone army? In other words, can we do it when only building infantry as our combat units? The rules for this challenge are simple. I can only build infantry units for combat. However, we will be using the dictionary definition of infantry rather than the game's, so mech units are allowed. I can build non-combat transport units. And lastly, pre-deployed units can be used for pre-deployed maps. However, I will try to avoid attacking with them if possible. The challenge starts off with some excellent mood music that I'd love to play but can't for copyright reasons. We learn that War's world is being assaulted once more by Black Hole, and this time Sturm decided to make some real friends instead of just cloning Andy. Seems a good idea. I'm promptly reminded just how talkative Nell can be as a mentor, to the point that at times during this run I started to wonder if the real challenge was actually just seeing how quickly I could mash the A button to skip her dialogue. The first mission teaches you to use basic infantry and an APC, which is just perfect for my run since I'm not planning to use anything else if I don't have to. As for this mission, well, it's the first mission of the game. I'm pretty sure it's impossible to lose without deleting your own units, so naturally I win. After skipping more dialogue, we travel to the next mission to command Sami's army. She's an infantry specialist, and her power will be a critical part of keeping this run alive later on. This mission wants us to learn about tanks and artillery. As far as I'm concerned, they're not infantry, so I'm not interested in them. I start by using my mech to tank out the enemy tank on my side of the map, and then shift my attention toward forming a choke point with the bridge to make the coming onslaught more manageable. My tank unit misbehaved by existing, so I put it in timeout on my HQ and never touched it again. The artillery is a ranged unit, so naturally I put it on the front lines for it to soak up direct fire with my APC. Somewhere in Blue Moon, Grit is probably cringing over that. Though I can't build anything on this map, I take advantage of the cities for extra defense and gradual healing until I overcome the enemy. Thankfully, Flak isn't too smart, so I had little trouble holding the bridge and gradually wearing down his forces. At the end, I load my mech into an APC so that I could capture his HQ, since I was expecting his APC to run from me and I knew my mech would not be able to chase it down. Instead, he decided to just sit there, so I destroyed it since I thought that'd be more interesting than just a capture. Orange Dawn introduces us to the direct specialist Max, as well as the B-Copter and medium tanks, which, as Max points out, are just stronger regular tanks. In the rivalry of big muscly men, we're supposed to use Max's overwhelming force to destroy Flak again. But that requires attacking with vehicles, so once more, I refuse. Instead, I hang back to bait my enemy in onto the small island on the top right corner while my T-Copter draws in his Battlecopter. Every unit he has is a major threat to my infantry, but this copter was extra scary because of its high movement. My B-Copter takes on the barricade role this time to slow his tanks, and for some reason the AI refuses to attack it. Though, even if it did, I'm still confident it would hold the line, at least long enough. Back at the real battlefield, I get a lucky roll and my copter survives, allowing me to barricade his in while I transport my infantry to the enemy HQ. By the time he realizes what is happening, I capture the HQ and win the match without destroying a single unit. With what I thought to be the last of the tutorial section over, we now encounter our first series of branching missions. These are common throughout the game, and at first I opt to try Max's mission. Here, we're faced with a powerful air force, but we're expected to easily counter it with the anti-air units that we spawn in with. I'm refusing to use these at this point, so attempt after attempt fails as I try to get my infantry over to his HQ. However, at this point, I can't figure anything out. I have no response to any of his air units without using mine. His fighter takes out my T-Copter wherever it goes, and his bombers target down my infantry, and if they don't get them, the B-Copters do. I decide to take a little break and attempt one of the other missions instead. Since she is our infantry specialist, I decide Sami's mission since I thought it would be the easiest for this run. It's the first time that we encounter a base so far, but as Nell helpfully points out, there's no chance we're going to get to it, so we have to aim for an HQ capture instead. This is also our first time with C units, which we're supposed to use to take the upper hand, but we won't. Nell wants us to take our T-copter and put it on the cruiser so that we can transport it safely. I decide this isn't the best course since I'm really in a hurry, so instead I use my ships to barricade their submarine, keeping it away from my lander, which I try to load with an APC, and a tank. I then take my T-copter over to the island instead to load it with a mech, which I will transport over towards the HQ to give some reinforcements. This is our first timed mission, and I have only 7 days to win before we fail. This leaves me with no choice but to capture the HQ, since I can't possibly wear down all of her units in that time with only a couple mechs. Since this is Sami though, I have a plan. I begin to sack my more powerful units to her rockets and her sub in order to build up my CO power. My goal is to fill it up so that I can use it to capture her HQ in one turn. I was hoping that her AA guns would stay on this back island as they did in a previous run, but just my luck, they decided to move to the center as well. I bring my lander in, and not only do they attack, but they also decide to sit on the HQ. Perfect, just perfect. When hope seems lost, I manage to lure her AR off of her HQ to attack my mech, with it surviving with only 1 HP. I pop my superpower, use that 1 HP mech to capture the HQ, and claim another win for this run. With this mission complete, I return to Max. And after so many losses that the AI started to ask if I was okay, I realized that winning this infantry only is not going to be possible, at least as far as I can see. Of course, I didn't break the rules of this run though, since I haven't built anything besides infantry or transports. So, while I was hoping to not use any other vehicles to attack, I reluctantly have to accept that I need to here, since I really want to see if I can beat the factory mission later on. I was hoping to avoid the Neotank mission since I didn't think that would be possible either, but unfortunately I discovered that even if you don't capture the city that gives you the map, the game still gives you the map to teach you about these. There is some neat hidden dialogue from it though, so that was pretty cool. Even with the flag there, I just try to simply ignore it, and we move on to Andy's mission, the first time I get to actually use a base to build something. Max wants to take command in this battle, but his specialty is still tanks, and tanks are useless to us. So Andy and Nell kick him out, we get our first bases, and our enemy gets their first black cannon. Not really a fair trade in my opinion, so it's time to destroy it. I start by rushing my T-copter to the center base while sending a steady stream of infantry north to bother my enemy, capturing anything they can along the way to feed funds into arming my troops. Every so often I supplement my forces with an APC to boost movement and get those heavy mechs to the front lines. I recognize that I need to hit the cannon as soon as possible because the longer I take, the more time Flak will have to actually field some powerful units against me. Once I've captured the middle base, I try to steal his base so that I can build a wall between his forces and the cannon. I didn't really expect to get this base, but to my surprise I did fairly easily. It isn't long after that my first mech attacks his cannon, and I'm reminded that it can shoot any units directly in front of it. This means I won't be able to simply park an APC next to my mech, but will instead need to funnel additional units in to replace the damaged ones. From here, the match becomes a steady slog of marching infantry up from my HQ to bother Flak's units. At one point he built a tank, but it ended up being little trouble for a mech on a city, and he fortunately didn't build any more or any AR, which could have torn through my forces. Sheer numbers proceed to overwhelm his weaker units, and soon the black cannon falls. I even managed to capture his final base before winning. Here I'd expected and hoped the factory mission would appear, but since it didn't, I was forced to do the Neotank lab mission instead. There's really not much to say here, because it's a timed capture and a pre-deployed mission. There's nothing I can do but play it normally just to proceed. At long last, we come to the mission I was most looking forward to, the factory, the final barrier standing in the way of liberating Orange Star. Sami is the clear choice, and the battle begins. Well, after some more beautiful theme music that I still can't play for you. Nell has a spy on the inside, and we learn this giant installation is called a factory. It always makes me wonder, if no one knew what a factory was, how has Orange Star been building its vehicles? Or is this simply a case of the sheer size, and what confuses them is looking at it compared to nearby cities? I mean, think about it. This place must be the size of like an entire state or province. Video game logic. Time to target the pipe. I start off sprinting for the neutral base nearby so that I can deploy closer infantry to delay whatever the factory spawns. It's been a long time since I played this mission, and I wasn't sure how hard the AI could go with it. I mean, it can spawn anything for free, so this could get pretty bad, right? And I also knew that with only infantry, that side was going to be a losing front regardless. The most I could hope to do was draw fire from units gunning for the pipe, and hope that they stalled long enough to keep me alive. After taking the mid-base, I start capturing the base on the far left, as well as the airport. I can't build bombers for an easy win like you usually would on this mission, but a T-copter would be very helpful in crossing those rivers. It isn't long after that my first mech reaches the pipeline, though I was clicking so fast I can't actually tell you what day that was. Still, Flak progressively begins to use stronger units, including an A-Air and ranged units, both of which are especially troublesome with my limited options. I continue to spam infantry, marching a stream of mechs from south to north across the rivers while throwing everything else at my enemy. Fortunately, because of how Advanced Wars works, even if my units aren't the best at killing, they make up for it by clogging up spaces and slowing his turns. The middle base becomes especially handy here as it begins to send troops east to intercept my mechs. The battle rages onward. The fighting is long and drawn out. Brave soldiers fall to the might of Black Hole, but fresh souls rush to fill their ranks. The roar of charging tanks, the crash of rockets fired from afar, decimating entire squads sooner than new ones can pop in. Slowly, we continue to chip away at the pipe seam. The western front begins to look grim as my superpower becomes available. Flak gets his first. When the time comes, I opt to use my basic instead, empowering my troops less, but giving them 2 turns of extra strength, since I knew in the long run that could cause more damage to the pipe. We start to push back on the west, blocking his factory doors so that it can't spawn more units. The second day comes, and my mech is 1 damage point away from destroying the pipe. I pop my basic power once more for the extra juice, and soon after, the factory falls. To my surprise, I even got an S rank for it. This was an enjoyable challenge, and I'd recommend it to anyone who's looking for a way to spice up this campaign. It wasn't particularly hard like I was expecting it might be, but I'm sure the rest of the game is going to make me regret saying that right now. After all, Orange Star is the tutorial section. I especially had fun though with missions like Lash vs. Sami. At first glance, it didn't look like it was going to be possible to beat that mission with what was given to me at the beginning, focusing on just the infantry. With careful strategy and turn manipulation, it did become possible though, and it was fun to figure that out. Since Orange Star has been liberated now, it's time to move on to Blue Moon and Yellow Comet. Things are certainly bound to get interesting. Thanks for watching, and see you on the battlefield.